Out of all the game review companies out there, nobody has as much of a grip on the industry as IGN. They've been around for almost 30 years, they're insanely successful, and they are straight up not good at what they do. I'm not the first person to make fun of IGN. Their mistakes have been laughed at for years, but I am the first person who can actually tell you why they're so terrible. So let's jump straight to the tip of the iceberg. One of the most disliked IGN videos is their review of Alien Isolation. They give it a 5.9 out of 10, mainly citing issues with the game being too hard and frustrating. Obviously, those aren't good reasons to rate a game so poorly. This review was such an insult to gaming journalism that nearly a decade later, IGN acknowledged their past mistakes and praised Alien Isolation for the things that it did well. A game that they gave a 5.9 later became one of the most interesting stealth games of the era, yet they refused to make an updated review or even update the score because that's not something IGN does. Unsurprisingly, this is not the only time they've made a correction article. They gave God Hand a 3 out of 10 on release and made an article a few years later calling it one of the best fighting games of its time, which a 3 out of 10 does not fit, if you didn't know. They originally gave Overwatch a 9.4 out of 10, just to update their review 3 years later to a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. Let's be honest, Overwatch was a good game. It's not perfect. It was never perfect. I will give them some sort of breathing room on this because this updated score came after they revised their rating system to only include half and whole numbers. So if Simon felt the game was grazing a masterpiece, he would have to give it a 10. But still, Overwatch is like a 8, maybe a 9 at most. 10 is insane. Simon, come over here. Sit with me. I think it's easy to forget sometimes with the scale of IGN, that their reviews are written and scored by one person working on each game. That's right, despite their massive scale, IGN still does the exact same thing that everyone else in the industry does. I wanted to point that out because throughout this video, I'm going to be showing you some examples of reviews that I believe are objectively bad. And I want to be clear when I say that I blame the editors and the systems in place at IGN for allowing these mistakes to slip through so frequently. Reviewers are gonna write bad reviews, but those reviews shouldn't be published by one of the largest gaming publications in the world. Let's move on down a bit to pointless complaints and inconsistencies. The most popular one is too much water, in regards to there being an over-reliance on water-type HMs and water-type Pokemon in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. I'm gonna be honest, I actually understand this one. There was an overwhelming amount of surf sections in this generation. It's a valid complaint. It's just worded extremely poorly. Instead of focusing on poor wording, I want to focus on complaints like still uses BMI for Wii Fit Plus. What do you think they're gonna measure with this? The game doesn't come with a doctor. One of my personal favorites is their review of Skate 3. Despite feeling very different from the two previous entries in the series, Skate 3 was criticized by IGN for being a bit stale. And while I could see a decent argument being made for that, it's a point that I haven't seen them make with any other franchise. In fact, they often praise Call of Duty for providing familiar Call of Duty action, even when the game is Infinite Warfare. I would also like to point out that despite claiming it felt a bit stale, and saying that there's not much of a reason to get Skate 3 if you already have Skate 2, they still gave Skate 3 a higher score. IGN struggles to remain consistent with franchises. They criticized the first Dark Souls game because it's not for the timid, and the second for punishing you too much when you die. They did not complain about either of these things, with Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro, and Elden Ring, which is interesting because what their complaints described is a From Software game. It's a strange choice to feel like these are valid points of criticism just to not mention or consider these things later down the line when you're reviewing games that are built on the same principles. And now for a fan favorite. The Sonic Unleashed review. A lot of people have criticized IGN's coverage for Sonic Unleashed as being too harsh. Specifically, the Xbox 360 and PS3 version of the game which they gave a 4.5 out of 10. Whatever you've heard about this review, I promise it gets much worse. This review was written by the former editor-in-chief of IGN, Hillary Goldstein, who was also a part of the bi-weekly IGN podcast, 3 Red Lights. No review copies were handed out for Sonic Unleashed, so assuming IGN was focused on getting this review out as fast as possible, Hillary had to go out and get a copy on November 18th. The final version of his review was posted on December 2nd. That gives 2 weeks for Hillary to beat the game, write his article, and record a voiceover for the video. For someone working full-time on this, that's definitely possible. But you also have to consider that during this time, he also wrote his review for Prince of Persia, 3 other articles, and recorded episode 49 of the podcast. In this podcast episode, he claims that he'll be finished with his Sonic Unleashed review by the following Monday, after bashing the game relentlessly.
And that game's a piece of crap. So, if you were thinking like you wanted to buy a Sonic game, that game is an absolutely piece of garbage. Don't buy it.
So, editor's choice?
Yes. Yes, my choice to go in the gas chamber.
I sincerely doubt that he had finished the game before making these comments, but even if he did, criticizing it like this before fully collecting your thoughts and finishing your review is extremely bad journalism, and it's not something that should be expected from the editor-in-chief at IGN. Some people have speculated that Hillary never actually finished the game in its entirety, but I doubt that's the case. I just think he made up his mind very early on and never really gave it a fair chance. Speculation is boring, so let's move on to some other mistakes IGN has made, including provably not finishing a game. In the current, still published review of Resident Evil 2's remake, there is an edit correcting a factual inaccuracy in how you unlock the second part of the story for the other playable character. This error exists and can only exist if the reviewer did in fact not finish Leon's section of the story in its entirety. The same reviewer, who is now an executive producer and host, also fell into controversy with his review of Pixel Junk's side-scroller. I come to you from the future to correct a factual error that I made, which is something IGN would never do. So, in Pixel Junk's side-scroller, the full ending of the game is only shown to you if you defeat it on normal difficulty or harder. In fact, multiple things change about the game depending on what difficulty you play it on. IGN's review states that there is no reward for beating the final boss other than a swift kick back to the title screen with no more than congratulations. This would imply that he played it on the easiest difficulty and falsely criticized the game for not having a proper ending. To the reviewer's credit, this is an oversight, and I can understand that. What is not acceptable is that when the game developer points this out to you, you insist that you beat the game on the normal difficulty. Furthermore, IGN has a content policy stating IGN does not take content down or unpublished content, relying instead on updates with editor's notes as necessary to convey corrections or other changes. If you go to the Pixel Junk side-scroller review, you will not only see that they removed this section from their review before putting it back in, but you will also see that you cannot access the explanation as to why because IGN removed their blogs. Finally, with one of the easiest fixes and blatant moments of an IGN reviewer not paying attention, in their article about BioShock, through the editorial process and currently in the article 18 years later, they state that the game is set in the 1940s, despite the opening of the game clearly showing it takes place in 1960. While that might not sound like a big deal, I personally would expect the largest gaming review publication in the world to pay a little more attention to the games they're playing. I wish I could show you more examples, but unfortunately mistakes like this from IGN aren't very well documented. I'd have to go through every review by hand to find them, so if you know of any mistakes that their writers and editors have made, or want to go out and find some for yourself, let me know about them in the comments down below. I love reading about these things, it's super interesting to me. We can bash IGN all day long, but I think that it'd be more helpful to ask, what can they do? The easiest solution is to have multiple reviewers collaborating on a project. The bigger the sample size, the more objective and bias-free the reviews will be. Even just having the editor play through a portion of the game, not even in its entirety, to check for inaccuracies would be helpful. If they can't do that for budget reasons, some more advice I have would be to cut the tech reviews. It's more work for your editors in a field that you are not succeeding in and highly contested in by people who are better at making tech reviews. And if you're going to stick to the single reviewer format, then there needs to be a better system in place to create more consistent and objective reviews. I don't know what that system looks like because it shouldn't have to exist in the first place, but IGN clearly needs one, so they should figure something out. Anyways, please make sure to like and subscribe. I've said pretty much all I want to say about IGN. I hate them and they're bad, so have a good day.